Workers who caused a $50,000 plus accident for their company but didn't get fired. What happened? I was an irrigator for a large alpine tree farm. One boss sprayed field with a really expensive pesticide. Other boss didn't know and told me to water the trees. I washed off $60,000 worth of chemicals. Got yelled yet. But other boss stepped in and took the blame. It was actually a great place to work. Blew out $300,000 worth of lights. A children's museum in Santa Ana has a massive cube on its roof as a sort of landmark. It used to have the edges light up at night. I was told by a supervisor it needed to be shut off. Explained I didn't know how. She basically told me to figure it out, wasn't mean about it, but was clear. Long story short, it costs way too much to fix. So anyone from Orange County, CA now knows why the cube has been dark for the last 10 years. Edit. Autocorrect. For those asking. The lights were installed around 2004 and they were not simple LED strips. They looked more like large tubes that stretched the entire edge. And they had a massive bank of computers controlling them. I have no idea how it all worked. But I was told a few months later that's how much it was going to cost to fix. It does sound expensive by today's standards. Was installing a $80 K-circuit card in a machine. New card looked wrong. Couldn't tell why at first. Supervisor took this to mean I was an idiot. Installed the card. Card smoked. Turns out, it looked wrong because it was missing a few IC chips that had to be installed immediately before use. Those ICs were designed to hold in the magic smoke in. I have learned after 25 years in facility maintenance that the color of the smoke, blue, black, gray, brown, white and red, yet smoke had a red tinge to it, correlates directly with how much money a replacement board is going to cost. I was programming a CNC making prototype directional drilling tools. There were hundreds of thousands of lines of code generated. I made a decimal error editing a few of them. Scrapped a 120k part. Luckily we made 2 of them in case of an error. Boss wasn't real happy. But in the end the customer was happy and ordered many more and ended up being a major customer of ours. It's a bad feeling though. You get a pit in your stomach upon realizing the mistake. I work in casinos and we offer lines of credit to the customers. A customer sat down at a table and asked for $50,000, which the pit manager gave them. Had the pit manager check our system, she would have seen that his credit has been suspended. She starts freaking out. The patron already lost the money by the time she realized the line was suspended. The customer refused to pay since he never signed anything. The state fined us another $50,000 for failure to follow our procedures. Pit manager kept her job even though it was the second time she made a mistake of this caliber. Edit. Because people are questioning the taxes and if this is a real loss. Casinos are typically taxed differently than most businesses. Casinos typically pay their taxes daily or weekly, depending on the state, and are taxed on what they won. So say the casino as a whole had $1,000 gambled there in a day and they won $100 of this amount. The $100 would be taxed immediately for state tax. Then we would calculate our expenses and other line items and pay our federal taxes at the end of year. I do irrigation for high-end estates. One year I forgot to unhook one battery operated zone from a faucet. The owners returned home in the spring to 6 of water in their house. With a waterfall running down the grand staircase. Had to gut most of their $10,000 house. Thank Jibbers for business insurance. I bet that was a fun phone call to get. Hey. Drove a dump truck into a 20-foot deep pit full of steel rebar. Jumped out at last second, which most likely saved my life. Wasn't old enough to drive. Was told to do so by older employee in position of responsibility. Did what I was told. Put it in first rather than reverse. Looked over shoulder. Took foot off gas. And went forwards rather than backwards. Rebar was destroyed. Dump truck was a write-off. As I was underage, I was just given 2 weeks off and told to keep quiet. I guess they claimed on the insurance and said someone else was driving it. Holy shit, dodging a lawsuit like an oversized bullet bill there. I work for a public hospital in Australia. No one ever gets fired unless you can prove gross incompetence or active attempt to harm a patient. Was working in sterile manufacturing. Training a new pharmacist. I was pulled away to help cover another area at the same time. Trainee pharmacist made up a drug worth $60k, or using the wrong syringes. This drug had to be made up in special syringes because it leaches PVC. I got pulled up in front of the director and asked to explain why it happened. They weren't happy with not enough staff. Need more time allocated for training. But it didn't go any further. A good friend of mine works for Bowers, a unionized commercial plumbing company. A few years ago when he was a journeyman, he flooded the Kennedy Center in DC because he cut a pipe before shutting off the water. He fully expected to be fired, but nothing ever happened to him. When I asked what the Kennedy Center did in response, he just said nothing. I guess they have good insurance. He is a foreman now. I was 17 and I started working at one of my dad's businesses. When I joined, they were selling 5,000 or leather jackets a month in Europe. I was very inexperienced, but I convinced my dad to let me handle it. He agreed but said he'll hire an advisor for me so I don't make any colossal mistakes. On my second day, I authorized a previously cancelled order to be shipped, which was worth about $68,000. The jackets were ready, but due to being late on the delivery date, a new letter of credit needed to be opened which ensures guarantee of payment. I spoke to the customer in London who said he will pay if I ship the items, but he won't open the LC because that's going through a lot of channels. I authorized the shipment and just a few days later the company closed and the guys who owned the company skipped town. My dad didn't say a word to me remarkably, but I learned my lesson anyway. A friend of mine was filling up an industrial tractor tire and it exploded in his face. He hadn't been properly trained how to do it. He was in a coma for a few months. Had facial reconstructive surgery. And tons of therapy afterwards. The company paid for all of his medical bills. I'm not sure how much it actually was. But I'd wager it was $50,000 plus. After he recovered, he was moved to an office job with the same company. I'm sure you know. But putting this here just for others. Do not FCK with commercial tires. Not just tractor trailers but any work type vehicle. They are not like the tires on your Toyota. Or even your pickup. They carry almost 3 times the pressure and everything on them is heavier to deal with it. If one goes at 110 c a foot from your head, it is bad news. Not mine. But one I got to see play out. One of the first calls I got from a customer in my previous job, selling power plant equipment, was from a buyer who had purchased a little under $100k in products from my predecessor. He wanted to know why nothing he bought looked like the stuff he had been sent. Thinking we got the order wrong. Turns out that sometime between the 70s when the site was built and 2012 the unit had been completely gutted and stuffed with another company's equipment. But for some unknown reason the customer failed to change their site drawings, and so when this guy started a couple months earlier he had no way of knowing he was ordering the wrong stuff. I did what I could to help the guy out. We took back the common parts that we could sell to other customers. But he had to eat close to $70k in useless parts. His bosses weren't happy, but couldn't justify doing anything against him considering the circumstances. Was in Afghanistan and one of the QA sergeants, a really nice guy always very helpful to everyone, was in charge of getting rid of some bad rockets that were set to be sent to EOD to be exploded. Was also in charge of the replacement brand new rockets that were supposed to go into inventory. He accidentally gave EOD the brand new rockets for disposal instead of the bad ones and they were disposed of. Millions of dollars wasted by accident, and that's how our entire unit didn't get any awards for that deployment. I tried to copy paste a website from production to test. I somehow cut and pasted Client lost a good $100K in website revenue while the site was down and nobody noticed until the next morning. I was relatively new and my managers have done this job before, so they were waiting to congratulate me on my first big screw up. Another co-worker had completely deleted a production database with no backups before a week prior. So it wasn't even the biggest screw up we've had in the department. One of our largest clients had overpaid due to a system issue in the billing software. This client pays us usually $5,000,000 annually. So they are top priority when there's an error. They wanted us to cut a check for the overpayment immediately. And of course we wanted to do it for them ASAP as well. However, I was the one who was to do the math on how much the error costs and how much money to cut them a check for. And it had to be done that day. It was at least 100,000 entries in our database for this customer I had to comb through. And nobody in the office who could program me a macro. I had to learn how to write a macro in Excel that night. Anyhow, I sent them a check for $67,000 more than was appropriate. And we didn't catch the error until we audited the account the following year. Of course. They insisted since it's our error we should not withdraw the check. And if it's a choice between $67,000 or $5,000 a year. Well, I got a very strong talking to and told to be more careful next time. I make $50. $0 mistakes weekly. I just need to make $100. $0 more somewhere else to make up for it. Life of a commercial construction estimator. Was working in investment banking at the time. M&A specifically. Had just closed a $4 billion deal. The fee for which was about $10 million for the bank. I was a new analyst. And this was my first time preparing an invoice. Turns out you need to include our legal fees in the invoice. Which came out to the tune of $150K. Invoice went out without the fees. Client paid the $10 million for our advisory services. Didn't want to look like dinguses after the fact. So we ate the $150K legal expenses. Managing director on the deal wasn't thrilled. But basically just said he should have paid closer attention to the invoice I prepared. Could have gone differently. But whatever. I ended up being directly responsible for netting the bank like $120 million in fees over the next 2 years. So at the end of the day nobody really cared. First week of my previous job put in a buy of 230 years US Treasury bond future as a sell. So our master account showed a total that was 400 different from what it really was. Position was zeroed out to a total that was wrong by 400 futures. Came in the next morning and got my ass reamed for the 200K error due to the futures we had bought to flatten the position. Spent the entire day shitting my pants and miserable. Then my boss took me out for drinks after work and explained that the error was actually in our favor because the futures had gone up overnight and we owned 400 more than we were supposed to. Furniture warehouse. Drove a forklift into the steel I-beam holding up the warehouse roof. Lift never worked again and I got stuck in the electronics cage pulling items for delivery and installing ice makers and doing door changes on refrigerators. Company was in dire straits anyway. So I didn't get fired and they closed their doors less than a year later. Not me. But a manager I worked directly with. Dude forgot to ship 2 trailers full of grocery product, meat and produce, to the store at the end of the day over the course of about a month. Product all went bad overnight, $50K each. Drove his industrial forklift through a shrink wrap machine sometime in that month too. Kept his job. Later got fired for shoving his manager against a wall and threatening him. A manager at my store broke a pipe that connected to the sprinklers with a forklift and it rained down on thousands of dollars worth of products and took about a dozen people about 2-3 hours to clean it up and sort out the ruined product. The guy didn't even get his forklift license suspended. It was not the first time he had an accident with it. Either. I have a buddy who works for an energy company. I believe what happened with him was he left a rail switch in a wrong state, placing two trains traveling in opposite directions around a curve on adjacent tracks inside company property. Pretty sure one train was carrying coal. Anyway, this accident basically wrecked both trains and shut down part of the company's operations for a day. Estimated loss in the tens of millions. Dude still has his job. I was driving a forklift and punctured a 250-gallon tote of a very expensive fungicide. One tote costs around $70k. All but a few gallons spilled onto the floor. I thought for sure the boss was going to hang me by my toes and beat me to death. I called him up and explained the situation. I was driving too fast. Didn't see the tote. And hit it. He came and looked. He was pissed off but didn't say anything. Then after a few minutes he turns and says, "Clean it up." Shit happens. No one got hurt and that's all that matters. Best boss I've ever had. He would have been 100% justified in firing me, but if you owned up to a mistake and made an attempt to correct it, he would let it slide. What do you mean clean it up? Boss? You see all that fungicide on the floor? What did you do? OP? Not me, but one of my agents. They were writing some home insurance for an older home with the rebuild cost coming out to be just about $500k. The agent gets to the binding page with the last few underwriting question, one of which was type of plumbing. Customer had made it clear multiple times that his was galvanized steel. Agent put that, but the system kicked back it was unacceptable, so the agent just switched it to copper. 3 months later the family come back from a 2-week trip to a broken pipe and a flooded house. The insurance carrier refused to pay because the agent just went around the kick-out. My agency wrote a check for nearly the full rebuild cost of the home. Agent was told to never do that again. First day flying an MQ-1B Predator drone. I disabled a safety feature. 12 hours later when they tried to land it, it lost communication and flew off into the sunset. Crashed, and eventually we got most of the pieces back. $7. 5 million. Since there was an instructor with me, they were at fault for not correcting it. We were working remotely and my boss had a rental car. We had an employee on for an extra day and he didn't have a hotel for the night. But he said he had a friend he could stay with back in our home city. My boss gave the guy her rental car to drive to his crash pad. And maybe 15 minutes later he calls to say he had a multi-car rollover accident, totaling the rental and causing tens of thousands in other damages. The rental company refused to pay because he wasn't listed as a driver. His personal insurance refused to pay because he was working. Our corporate general liability refused to pay. It dragged on for over a year until the company had to eat the full cost of the totaled rental and all the repairs to the other parties in the accident. Somehow none of us even got reprimanded. Remember folks, only registered additional drivers drive the rental car. The receptionist at my job accepted a delivery at the front desk instead of insisting they take it to the loading dock, which is protocol. She never bothered to take the box to the warehouse or tell anyone it was at the front desk. Just left it there all day. As I was leaving for the day I noticed a box still sitting at the front desk. These are usually patient pickups that didn't get picked up for whatever reason and need to be returned to the pharmacy until the next day. I took the box to the back to discover that it wasn't a patient pickup. It was a delivery of very expensive medication that should have been refrigerated. We contacted the company to find out when it was dropped off that day. And since it was sitting out at the front desk unrefrigerated all day, it was no longer usable. Easily over $100k in medication wasted. Receptionist was written up and reprimanded, but not fired. I work in one of the largest semi-trailer manufacturers in North America. One day we had a guy making couplers. The part that hooks the truck up to the trailer. The most important part of a coupler is the kingpin. The large solid pin that slides into the fifth wheel on the back of the truck. Basically, this one piece is going to holding the weight of the entire trailer. And so obviously it has a lot of what we call safety critical welds on it. These are the strongest welds done only by our best welders, inspected and signed off by at least 2 people. And they are not in a spot that's easily accessible to be cut out. He put in 7 or 8 of the wrong kingpin. Nobody noticed it until they were already in the trailers. They say the labor costs alone were over $50. Young chemist in the pharmaceutical industry. I was trying to take a shortcut by reaching around a large liquid sample bottle in the cold room to reach a raw material in a keg behind it. My large clunky arms knocked the glass bottle, which shattered. The sample in that bottle was about $50. $0 per gram. That bottle had many grams given its weight. My supervisor forgave me and said it was NBD since I was the youngest person the company had ever hired and it was my first time working in a pharmaceutical environment. Since then, I learned to be more patient and know when to and when not to take shortcuts. My brother told me this story of when he was stationed on the USS Enterprise many years ago. One of his jobs was to fill liquid oxygen containers from some kind of filling station or hose on the deck. Apparently it was somewhat dangerous because of the pressures and cold involved. Anyway, he was told that the canisters could explode while filling them, and to kick them overboard if they made a lot of noise while filling. Apparently they would creak and groan. He took this as if they made any noise while filling, and kicked quite a few of them overboard before being chewed out and eventually properly trained. And they cost thousands of dollars each.